Recording is on.
Okay. All right. So let me just get started here with the first one. So this is overcoming your fears to get published. And if you didn't see the thing that I had said in the Facebook um, invite or whatever, the FEARS is an acronym that stands for finish, edit, analyze, research, and then submit. Originally, this presentation was geared towards traditionally published authors, but I have also set it up to go ahead and work with indie published authors. So you can use some of the techniques that we talk about in analyze and research. You can go ahead and use if you're looking to be self-published, or indie published is a more common term that people use nowadays. So some tools of the trade are writing software you'd need. So you can usually get Word for about $139 on the lower side. Scrivener runs about 49, and that's on sale every year during National Novel Writing Month. I don't know if they do that anymore since Nano is no longer a thing. But Scrivener is probably one of the cheaping writing softwares. Or if you're like me, you can use Google. And I've used Google Docs for years. So you can also try dictation. And of course, there's always the good old pen to paper. And I'm sure there's many more out there that are unique, different, and maybe geared more towards you. So if you think of anything and you want to share it with your classmates, go ahead and put some of that information in the Facebook group. Okay, so finish the book. So what we're talking about here is you can't basically get an unpublished book finished. So most likely, if you're not finishing a book, it's something like writer's block. Although in my opinion, writer's block is usually a name that we use just because we can't get something done, and that's usually for one of three reasons: you've either lost passion, you're just not interested in the book that you were the first 25 pages or so that you started it, you're going through the middle slump, you've gotten there, you know the beginning, you know the end, but that you're in the messy middle and you can't figure out where your story's going or what to put in there to get to the end. I write romance, so I know there's always a happily ever after at the end. I wasn't able to finish until I started writing out of order, but I'll get to that in the next thing. And then, of course, life happens. Sometimes things just happen, you move, stuff like that, and you're not able to get any writing done. Maybe you're busier at work than you normally are. So there are reasons that these things happen. So, what are some suggestions, some things that we can do to overcome that? So, if you're having a loss of passion and you're just not as excited as you once were, maybe you draw up some character profiles. So what I'm talking about there is, do you know what the characters look like? Do you know what order of birth they have? So I have characters, I do whole family charts for them now before I get started. Although most often, because I write romance, they were already in another book, so they're usually a side character, so I know a little bit more about them when I go to write their story. But that's something you can do. I usually do it in Google Notes. I have a friend, Crystal, who goes ahead and makes like whole binders for her series that she writes. And then another thing that I've always found helpful is write the back cover copy or the back blurb of your book. So if you go into a bookstore and you pick up a book and you like the cover, you flip it over and you read the back blurb to see if it's something that you're actually interested in. And if you write this might help you with your goal, motivation, conflict for the characters. Because usually when you're trying to describe those scenes, um, you're trying to figure out kind of the lead into the book. And sometimes that can help you remember what direction you were planning on going. The other thing is to try visual plotting using post-its. There's a method out there. You could Google plotting with post-its, and a bunch of these would come up as to how to plot and get stuff done. I've used Pinterest before, and I've used spreadsheets and calendars. Like I have a Bible for my Regency series, so I can keep track of who's related to who, events that happened in the world, events of the timelines of the books. So calendars, there's calendars you could like just print out a blank calendar so you can kind of track the timeline of your story. And then I had mentioned I used Google Keep as well to go ahead and visualize characters. So okay. The middle slump. So you got about halfway through your story and you can't move forward. Usually that's an indicator you don't know where your story's going or you've written yourself into a corner. So take a break from technology and try some old school pen and paper. That is something that's always worked for me. If I'm having problems on the computer, sometimes I just move to pen and paper and then I'm able to go ahead and work through that middle slump. Another practice that I've always had is Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist Way, and I have always done notes prior to, I've always done notes prior to like journaling prior to writing. And I usually do it before I write. I don't always do it in the morning, which is what she recommends, but I do it before I start doing any fiction writing because it kind of gets the junk out of my head. Try taking a shower or a bubble bath. They've done studies that find that water can be help kind of wear the stress away or wash away your worries and think about story a little bit when you're in there and then maybe create a writing space. If you don't have a dedicated writing space and you're somebody that writes when the mood strikes you, you're going to have to look at ways to trick your muse. You're going to have to look at ways to find that sacred writing space, whether it's every Friday in the coffee shop or whether it's drinking your favorite beverage while you're writing, whether it's sitting on the sofa or the table at the kitchen table, or if you're lucky enough to be able to have a desk somewhere in your house that you can carve out and create that space. And even if it is just the kitchen table, try and be consistent about the energy and the things, items that you have with you when you write, because it'll help center you into that world that you're building. So and then try writing out of order. Like if you are trying to write a fight scene and it is just not coming, maybe move on to the next scene and just like highlight in your notebook or go ahead and put a yellow highlighter in your document and say insert scene later or whatever, and then write down a brief description of what you need there. And then just move on to the next scene. A fight scene, you can even, because I've done that before too, where I haven't been able to write the fight scene, but I can write something like, and Jack laid there dead. And so then I can move on from there and go on to the next scene because maybe that's easier to write. And the point is to just kind of get through the story. If you're somebody that has to write linear from beginning of the story to the end of the story, try this technique a few times to see if it works. If it doesn't, then you might have to figure out some other way to try and get over those humps. And it might be something as being uncomfortable writing those scenes. If you're trying to write a love scene and it is not working for you, maybe that's your muse telling you that you maybe shouldn't be writing that kind of book. Or maybe you should just look at something else in that time to write instead. So I know I had a friend who got a divorce and she wasn't able to write any love stories. So she went into mystery for a little bit. So I think it's something to think about, like why are you having problems writing certain scenes? And then life events. So it happens to every writer from time to time. Some are joyous, some are tragic, and some are just unknown. But all create change that can be disrupting to your writing process. So take time away from your current work in progress. That's what WIP stands for, if you need to. This will be different for every writer. Take up journaling. Find Feed your muse creatively. So if you, I've most writers that I have met are other creators in other ways. So if you're having problems with your manuscript, go ahead and try and work on something else. Try painting, try scrapbooking, knitting, crocheting. There are a multitude of creative things that you can give an outlet, and those things might come easier to you than writing. It might also be that if you're having a life event, that you're just not going to be able to write and you just have to accept that it's going to take that much longer to get the work done. In 2021 and 2022, my mother died in November of COVID, and my father died 3 months later in March, early March of the next year. So that year, I kind of took a break from writing just because I had to deal with two funerals and their estate and a bunch of other stuff. So I think that it's one of those things that it's going to take, you just have to accept that it's going to not be as productive. Or look at it too, anything you do get on the page is better than nothing. So The irony is that I had already had two books with a publisher at the time, and they were published about the times that my mom died when the first one was published, and my dad died when the second one was published. So it wasn't like I was not publishing anything, but I haven't done anything since until last year in February when my first Regency came out. So it is something to think about if you have an event, and they don't have to be bad. Having a baby will take up a lot of your time without actually being a bad event. So moving where you can't find everything that you unpacked, that you packed, and you're looking for stuff and settling into a new home, that can also be disruptive to your writing process, as can a new job. So there's a multitude of things in life events that can disrupt your writing process. So I think that if you're having problems, just go ahead. It's okay to call it writer's block because that's what it is. You're blocked from writing, and just the key is to figure out why. So, and to find a balance in your new reality, whatever that may be. The only other thing that I would say about life events is if you are dealing with something pretty severe, like a death in the family, a trauma of some sort, or something like that, to go ahead and seek professional help. So I live with two people that suffer from seasonal affective disorder. So we've always tried to make sure that they have enough outside time in the winter and stuff like that. And then my husband does have PTSD. So I think it's something to think about too, that if you're really, really struggling, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. This is ending the first part of the section. I do have some homework for you for next week. So, for next week, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write a blurb for your story. So, take some time and look at books that you like to read, books that your story might fall into, and kind of create your own blurb for the story. You'll need it for later chapters or later chapters in here. So, yeah, you're still struggling with the how to write a book. Try to create a character sheet, especially if you're having a hard time writing one character over the other. And then try to write a scene with pen and paper over using your computer. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one here.
How do you apply the information you collect from beta readers, to your final to your manuscript? I guess not final manuscript. How do you collate all that information that you get and decide how to apply that? Mhm, yeah, yes, I have, yeah, okay. Yes, but I didn't have it that way, so I'll have to do it differently, yeah, next time. Yeah, I I have it all back. I almost don't know what to do with some of the feedback, and they well, it's just more I understand that they're both pretty much or they're all pretty much on the same page about a lot of it, except for maybe one of them. I had 4 beta readers, and so, um and I guess I could throw out the outlier on it, I guess. Yeah, it does. Um, although a lot of her feedback was hopeful, she caught a few things that I was like, "Whoops, that was" yeah. But yeah, and that's some of what I had them and then I stopped because I was getting a little frustrated and I've actually set it aside. I'm not in any huge rush or anything, so that's what I'm waiting for something like this to help me motivate. Um, but that does help. Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So you had mentioned that you send the editing to your editor before beta reader. Is that you do? Okay. Okay. Well, at the time, I hadn't decided traditional or self, but I think I'm leaning towards self. And I have a critique group slash partner. It depends on when it's a group or if it's a partner. Sometimes we're three, sometimes we're two. Um, and then I have a writing group that I'm in that has. Yeah. Mhm. This is my first complete work pro manuscript, and it is a time travel story, and so having somebody go through it has been helpful because there's lots of twists and turns in it, and, um, yeah, it's not linear at all. So, um, eyes on it is has been helpful, um, but and the sticky note thing and timelines and all of that is mandatory. But yeah, that right.